10 years ago, my friend was a face character at Disneyland, and told me about her friend who was friends with Goofy, which is what you say to people when out of costume, to preserve the magic instead of outright saying you're the character. Allegedly, one day, Goofy's shift was over, and he was trying to walk to the back area to cool off, when a very angry mom started yelling at him because he ignored her son. In reality, he couldn't see them as he was turning to walk away. The lady then called him racist, and said that Goofy was ignoring them because they were black. Goofy turned around to greet the child and signed his autograph book, and then turned to the mom, and slipped up his sleeve to quickly point at his own black skin underneath before walking away. Not a character, but my family went to Disney World a few times when I was a kid. My dad was abusive, physically and verbally. We eventually left him when I was 12. He was awful on vacations for just being miserable in general. It was Valentine's Day and my mom, dad, older sister and I were at one of the parks. All of the characters had big red hearts on a string around their necks. My sister was around 8 and I would have been 6. We had just gotten ice cream and my sister and I were excitedly looking around for our favorite characters. My sister just saw Eeyore, her all-time favorite character, so she turned around and my dad, not paying attention, ran right into my sister holding her ice cream cone and got it on his shirt. He hauls off and smacks her in the side of the face, knocking off her glasses and making her drop her ice cream cone. She starts crying as my mom starts giving him crap while he defended his actions, saying she should have watched where she was going. The next thing we know is my sister is being hugged by Eeyore. It shocked her out of crying and she was suddenly so incredibly happy because Eeyore just kept hugging her while my mom started taking pictures. Eeyore stopped hugging my sister only to point to his paper heart, then to her. Then he hugged her again. There is a picture somewhere in my mom's basement of my sister and I standing with Eeyore, my sister beaming but clearly looking like she had been crying. I still think about that Eeyore to this day and wondered what they were thinking. It was the early 90s when people were largely still expected to mind their business when it came to such things, and reading these other comments makes me realize he may not have been able to do anything else anyway, but I appreciate his gesture nonetheless. Thanks Eeyore. I have a close friend who was Woody for a while at Disneyland. He said that one time the float caught on fire during a show, and they had to play it off completely in character. They danced around it and had to quickly get it backstage to deal with the problem. He said they played it off well enough that no one seemed to notice / there wasn't any panic. He said he had never seen an instance of anyone breaking character because everyone was very well trained and there's always at least 6 or so cameras that can see you at all times. I also one time offered an unopened water bottle to an employee when it was near 100 degrees, and he said if anyone at Disney saw that, he would be fired. They can't take anything from guests. He also mentioned the cameras constantly watching both crew and patrons. I wasn't a character but worked closely with them, as a photographer. Disney performers are trained to never break character for whatever reason. They have ways of signaling their character attendant that they are in distress, and it's generally up to the character attendant to avoid any weird or uncomfortable situations. As far as weird situations, they do get people that stalk them in the park. Like some people get in those lines multiple times to get a photo with a specific performer. The weird side of Disney fanatics are something else. I worked at Club Disney for the brief time it was open. We had codes we used on the radio headsets that were coordinated with character names. For instance, code Baloo meant there was blood that needed to be cleaned up immediately. One day, I'm taking a stroll around the club to check on things when I spot a small boy about 2 years old taking a massive dump right in the middle of the play area. He sees me, starts to cry, and runs away with no clothing on the lower half of his body. I get on the radio and can't think of what to say as we hadn't discussed a code for human feces in the play area and naked kid running around. So I just called, I have a code poo situation in the play area and piglets on the loose. I wouldn't say break but I was a lifeguard and I had to ban this kid from going down the water slide. Every single time I told him he had to be feet first and every time he said okay. But he kept going head first and it got to the point where the other kids saw him and were copying him. He left and cried to mom and dad and I explained to mom and dad why. They left and cried to my coordinator and my cord came back saying that wasn't very magical. I explained after several times of this kid not listening, other kids were copying him. In any case I got a stern talk to about being the nice lifeguard who explains why versus the mean lifeguard who just yells orders. Later that day that kid was running across the deck, despite several requests not to, tripped and ate concrete. My wife and I went to Disney. We were both 30 and it was my first time ever going to a major theme park. My wife wanted to meet the princesses, so we stand in line and she goes up to get a picture. The Cinderella asks my wife, "Is that your Prince Charming?" My wife said I was. Cinderella asked, "How did you meet?" My wife paused for a second and said, "That story is not Disney World appropriate," and Cinderella laughed, like a real breaking character laugh for just a second and caught herself. If she was drinking coffee it would have been a spit take. Finally she adds, "Oh well, I bet it was romantic anyway." It's not a great story, but seeing her break character for a genuine laugh is my favorite memory from that trip. And for anyone who wants to know, short version, we met at a party. She was topless on a trampoline. My mom was a costumed character for a couple of years at Disneyland. She was very committed to keeping character, but there was one instance where she broke character. Two teens jumped her when she was playing Piglet and started beating her. At first she just tried to block and defend herself, but at one point she knocked one of the boys to the ground and pinned him. Considering my mom's only 4 feet 10 inches and was wearing around 50 pounds of costume, I consider that fairly impressive. The other kid continued to assault her and I think she may have yelped or cried out because the kid she had pinned hurt her and said, "Oh crap, it's a chick." Like, no way, dumb idiot. Most of the shorter characters are women because, well, they're shorter. Cast members came to help her and the kids were banned from the park. My mom got in a lot of trouble for that too, though, because she broke character. She was suspended for a couple days. I have a story of someone I know who used to do the mascot stuff at Disneyland. Back a couple years ago he had to dress up as Nick from Zootopia for his shift. Now the thing about this costume is that the tail is a massive metal spring to help give the illusion that it can move on its own. With that out of the way, one day he was doing his rounds with his partner, Judy, and they had a bit of a troublemaker, 11-ish boy, who was being a little rough and pulling on his tail. Keep in mind this tail is pretty heavy at around 40 pounds and is attached to his back pretty firmly. With no real proper field of vision other than the tunnel vision they get, no breaking character, and no security nearby to stop to issue, he was in a bit of a pickle. Fortunately for Nick, the father of said troublemaker told him to stop and apologize. He did so with a sour disposition that gave the impression he really didn't care. After said apology, a young girl behind him goes, "Hey Nick." And without missing a beat he does a complete 180 attempting to hit the troublemaker with his tail. He gets purchase and smacks the kid with a good thud and knocks the kid on his butt. While he was giving attention to the little girl his mind was racing that he was gonna get fired for this little stunt, but luckily for him, the dad pulls through by laughing at his kid's misfortune, telling him something along of the lines of, "You know you deserve that, right?" Maybe someone who actually played Tarzan can confirm this for me. Disneyland used to have a Tarzan character, but you don't see him anymore. Since the characters are always expected to pose for photos and selfies. And Tarzan wore nothing but a loincloth, women were constantly grabbing the actor's butt when they got in close. So, the park just quit that character. Obligatory not me, but my best friend is a very popular face character and she's told me some hilarious stories. One time though when she nearly broke character was when she was doing a meet and greet thing. A young autistic boy came in who got very overexcited and yanked her wig off. They put hundreds of bobby pins in her hair to keep them on, so you can imagine the pain, and she had to restrain herself so hard to not scream out. She said the wig was hanging off her head and everyone in the room just froze. The little boy started crying hysterically and had to be rushed from the room. They ended up closing her room up so she could get fixed, but she said it was a pretty crazy moment. Apparently the parents were so embarrassed they didn't even say anything to her and just bolted from the room with the boy. A face performer broke character for my husband and I. I won't say which park, but we took a trip to Disney about 2 months after our infant son died. He was our first. Our entire nursery was Neverland/Peter Pan themed. We always wanted to take him to Disney, have him meet Peter. Well, he couldn't. I got a memorial tattoo, an exact replica of my son's hospital ink handprint, and we got a picture of Peter Pan with the tattoo. We were alone with him and his handler. I tearfully explained the situation before asking him to pose with my arm. He took lots of photos with my tattoo and us. And afterward he hugged me tight, told me he was proud of me, and God bless us, and he was so sorry for our loss. It was amazing, emotional, and I'll never forget that Peter Pan was proud of me for finding the strength to keep on living. It honestly meant the world. I'm so glad he broke character. I'll always treasure those photos and that memory.